Good afternoon. My name is Paige Morrissette, and I am here with a very special guest, Mr. Justin Latini. Thank you for being here. We're very happy that you chose to be a part of this.
I am honored to be here, and especially meeting you today is a pleasure.
What branch of the military were you in?
Okay, so I was in the United States Navy, but we have a special branch of that, as you can see with the hat that I'm wearing today. So I'll wait till you get to my other question.
Why did you choose this branch?
Well, my dad had served in World War II, and actually I brought home Marine papers to have him sign, and he wouldn't sign them. He said that if I brought the Navy papers home, he would allow me to go into the military in the Navy. So
It sounds like he was pretty strict.
he was, but I think he saw what I couldn't see. He had experienced his service during World War II, and I think he saw the casualties with the Marines in the Philippines. That's where he was stationed. So I think he thought the Navy was a safer option.
When did you serve?
So I signed up in December of 1970, and I was called up 6 weeks later. So in 1971, I was living in the Boston area, and we went at 5 o'clock in the morning to the induction center, and I began my career flying to the Great Lakes to get to school. That was my boot camp.
Where did you end up serving?
So I wound up actually in submarines, nuclear submarines. As my dad told me when I went to go in the military, he said, don't volunteer for anything. And after boot camp and through some training, a gentleman approached me and said I would make a great candidate for submarine school. So I volunteered. And also, by the way, I was only 17 when I went in. That's why my dad had a sign. So I volunteered twice. And I remember I came home after school doing my schooling, and my dad asked me, he said, so what ship you on? And I said, I'm not on a ship, I'm on a submarine. And he looked at me and said, I'd rather have you be a Marine than go in those submarines. He just saw the World War II ones, and I tried to explain they were nuclear, they were new, and he just shook his head. So that was my introduction to the Navy and to the submarine force. I served on the East Coast and West Coast. I was in the Mediterranean, and I also served on the West Coast.
What did you do on those submarines?
So I was on two types of submarines. I was on the nuclear ballistic missile submarines, and I was on what they call a fast attack. So there are two types of submarines. And those submarines go out anywhere. The ballistic, you could go from 60 to 90 days underwater. And the fast attacks were a submarine that would go out for a couple of weeks and come back in. So it was a little different in transformation of what you did and where you went. We never really knew where we were, but we had an idea. There's no windows on a submarine.
Yeah. What were some of the reasons that you joined?
Well, I'll be honest, in 1969, I actually marched against the war. As you know, Vietnam was pretty much unknown until the late 60s, when all of a sudden every night on TV, families would be watching television. It was the first time in history that war was actually brought into the television. And at first I was against the war. I just didn't believe that we needed to be there. And then in 1970, after Kent State, which was in May, some National Guard fired on some college students. But at that time, everything seemed to have changed. People weren't against the war as much. They started to be against the warrior. And I didn't believe that that was true. I saw some of my classmates go off to war, and I felt that I wanted to join that. I did not want to be part of the population, the peer group, that were against those who were fighting. So that's kind of my reason for joining.
Were you drafted, or did you join voluntarily?
No, I would have been drafted if I didn't go. My number was 13, but I went in at the age of 17. So I have an older brother who had a draft number, was 216. He wasn't drafted. So I was, and for a little bit of history, 50% of those who served in Vietnam were draftees, and the other 50% were volunteers like myself who had served.
Was it scary thinking that you could be drafted when you got older?
I never really thought about the draft, I guess, because I already had the intentions of going in. I know some people left the country. I talked to a lot of guys who went in before the draft. I guess if you were at college, or if you were in a position where you felt you were going to be drafted, I never was in that position. So the draft never scared me, but about 9 million of us served from 1955 to 75, and only about 2.6 million actually served in Vietnam. So 7 million people served in bases around the world. And as I always explain to people, when you went in the service, you never knew where you were going to go. It's not like you have a choice. I want to serve, I want to go to Newport. No, it doesn't work that way. They're giving you your orders, you go where they tell you to go, and you do what you're told to do. So it's a different mindset when you get in the military.
What do you remember about the day you went to boot camp?
It's probably the longest day of my life. Like I said, my dad had dropped me off at 5 in the morning at the installation building in Boston. I remember flying to Chicago, to the Great Lakes, getting your hair cut, shaved, getting clothes that didn't fit. Just kind of a crazy day. It seemed to go on forever. And then finally around 2 o'clock in the morning, you finally got to your bed in the barracks. And I remember the lights going out. And it seemed like 2 minutes later, a trash barrel rolling down the aisle, and the drill instructors were screaming. It was 5 a.m. And then you started your day all over. So that was my first 24 hours was quite a long day.
Can you tell me a memorable experience about your service?
For us in submarines, we were a little different. We were a different crew. We didn't have the norm with a lot of servicemen. We didn't fly in uniform. We went out for 3 months, and then we came home or back to our base. So I didn't have the typical experience that a lot of other veterans had. But some of my experiences, I think one was, as you know, during the Vietnam War, a lot of the guys returning from Vietnam were spit at. They were called baby killers. And I never experienced that, but what I experienced, I just remember coming home. I had a sea bag, and I was walking through the airport, and I remember a woman walking toward me with a young boy, and I was smiling. I was in the military, and I remember just before she got to me, she moved way over to the side, like there was something wrong with me, and I just remember that feeling of not being accepted, and maybe that's why our generation of veterans. We make a point to thank those who served after us, that we thank them for their service, and we make sure that they know their service really matters, no matter where they served. So I think that's the tune that Vietnam veterans carry to other generation of veterans, that we want to make sure they were appreciated. But that was kind of the only experience I had that I felt different.
How did your service shape you as a person?
Well, going in the military, it gives you discipline. I grew up on a small farm, so I already had some kind of work ethic and discipline. I think it just reinforced that work ethic, that no matter what your job was, you had to do it and do it right. So that, and that kind of carries over to when I went back to school, I went back to college nights, and I remember students going out partying, and I was hitting the books, going to the library. Again, I was 4 years behind them because I had gone in the service. So I was a later student, so I knew I had to outwork those students ahead of me. So maybe that helped.
Do you have any advice for someone considering joining the military?
Yeah, I think it's a great opportunity, especially with the job market today and the education system being so expensive. I encourage young people to look at the military as an option, that you can get incredible skills. Once you're a veteran and you've done what you're supposed to do, for lifetime you're in a family. It's not like you go to 4 years of college and that's it. You're in a frat house and that's it. No matter where you go in the world, not just the United States, in the world, if you have a veteran cap on and another veteran sees you, it's a bonding. Sometimes they ask us, why do we wear a cap? Do we want people to know we're a veteran? And we say, no, we want to make sure that we find another veteran. And so your life you're part of that family. Whether you're a Marine or a Coast Guard or those in between, we're all a big family, and we will protect and we will support each other. And that's what's important.
All right, well, thank you for your participation in this project, and thank you for your service to our nation.
And thank you, and I hope this is a successful program.
Thank you.
Thank you.